Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Prevatt, and this is Dr. Abigail Levrini, and we're here today to discuss our work with adults diagnosed with ADHD and for a program for the APA Psychotherapy video series. We're glad to have some students and some colleagues here to discuss things with us, and we're going to be watching a segment, and I'd like to welcome you all today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves first. I'm a professor at Florida State University, and I work in a doctoral program in combined counseling and school psychology, and I'm also the executive director of the Adult Learning Evaluation Center, where we work exclusively with college students and young adults who have ADHD.
And as Dr. Prevatt mentioned, my name is Dr. Levrini, and I'm a clinical psychologist and owner of a private practice in the Washington, D.C. area called Psych Ed Coaches, and we specialize in this ADHD coaching model. And I also trained at Florida State University with Dr. Prevatt and was part of the research team that pioneered this ADHD coaching model.
Yes, can you expand upon the use of metaphors in this session?
Sure. So metaphors are just one tool in my toolbox. As you saw here, and as I briefly explained to Sean, one purpose is just to kind of create interest, create a visual image for him to conjure up and be able to focus on. Individuals with ADHD have a difficult time paying attention and staying focused, so it's a lot more interesting to have that visual representation rather than just lecturing at him and telling him an idea. But more so, as I mentioned, it's one tool, it's one strategy, and all individuals have different learning styles. So it's very important to play to those different learning styles and appeal to multiple senses. So metaphor being one tool in my toolbox, another tool was the timer, the different timers, and how that created kind of a different visual and stimulated some different senses. Also the use of the whiteboard. So he's not just listening to what I have to say and listening to the goal, but he can get it cemented into his mind with a visual representation and hearing. So you're hitting him both ways. So again, metaphor, the timers, the whiteboard, all those things are just multiple tools in my metaphorical toolbox.
And another thing I really like about that clip is it showed something that Dr. Levrini was doing on almost a parallel under the surface level. So she talked about the toolbox right there, and you'll see how she's going to carry this metaphor throughout the session. And later we're going to see clips where she mentions a building foundation and then putting up walls. And so almost subconsciously, this client is learning what it's like to be logical and structured and follow through, and she's really telling a story throughout this session. That was really nice.
So I'm wondering, what is the importance of asking the client questions in the coaching process?
There are several reasons for questions, but I think the main one is that this should not be a lecture. Clients with ADHD don't focus very well. So if Dr. Levrini was just talking the whole time, they'd be phasing out. So you want it to be a back and forth and hopefully get them very involved in the session also.
And I'd like to add that I think it's important to help these clients to feel successful and to validate them. Most of the time, these individuals have been experiencing failure upon failure and have struggles with self-esteem as a result. They've just been being told what they were doing wrong instead of what they were doing right over and over. So by asking questions, you're giving them that opportunity to come up with a creative response that you can then validate and have them feel successful and gain confidence.
Yes. Can you talk more about what defines a goal as long-term?
The trick with a long-term goal, I think, is to help guide the client toward a realistic expectation. For example, if a client comes in and they haven't read a book in 2 years, they're not going to probably be successful if they would like to read every night for 30 minutes. Similarly, we often see this in terms of exercise goal. So if a client hasn't set foot in a gym in 5 years, they probably aren't going to be running a 10K in 6 months. So it's really finding that, I call it the sweet spot in the session of what is realistic for that client. And it might not be ideal, might not be exactly what they see as perfection, but what is important is that it's better than it was, and to celebrate each of those small successes and then build upon those.
I want to mention that the other thing Dr. Levrini was doing here was keeping up that sense of continuity with her metaphors. So she started with the toolbox, here she brought back in the foundation, and so she's keeping that storyline going throughout the session also.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the idea of metacognition and the importance that that plays in the coaching intervention. Metacognition refers to a higher order thinking that involves active regulation over the cognitive processes engaged in learning. So literally it means thinking about thinking. And we find that a lot of clients actually find the most useful part of coaching to be that insight. Again, it's important because we don't want them just to achieve the goals that they've set out in coaching. We want them to be able to go out then into the real world on their own and be able to apply these ideas over and over in different ways. So it's really important to get that active thinking about thinking process to work in the session. So that's where it comes into play about finding that sweet spot with the objectives. Sometimes it's actually more helpful when a client's been doing really well week to week meeting his or her objectives and then has a really bad week and kind of stumbles a little bit and doesn't meet an objective. That can be a more valuable tool than if they were just experiencing success all the way through, because that's when the real learning occurs. And in the real world, inevitably, there's going to be times when you don't reach a goal. So being able to pick yourself back up and continue on the pathway can be the most valuable piece of it all.